Hey guys, here's a quick demonstration of how to get started on our next project. The things you're going to need for this project are the wooden block that came in your supply package. This wooden little piece of 2x4. It's got several holes drilled into the top. You're going to need your clothes hanger. Okay, this metal clothes hanger. You're going to need your nylon stocking, and it's also in your supply package, either in a little ball, a little plastic egg, or it's in a baggie. But this is a regular nylon stocking like someone might wear on their feet, right? We're going to be using this as the skin of our sculpture. So you can also use these pliers that I just sent home with you, needle nose pliers. And quick things to tell you about these pliers, I think they're really important. One thing is, with these pliers, let's get light. Right here, this section where the circle is sort of cut out, and there's a little section there that has two little sharpened edges. So this is good for cutting wire, and you can even cut this hanger wire with this stuff by putting into those little jaws there and squeeze down tight. And you can cut a piece off if you need to cut. Okay, but typically these are used for gripping things, right? You're going to squeeze this to grip and hold and unbend things if you want to. I'll tell you, most of these things, these hangers are pretty thin, and so they're pretty easy to unbend by hand. So I'm going to do this one just by hand. If you just take this and hold the bottom part of the hanger sort of firmly, you can start spinning this around, and you can see how I'm spinning this until it just loosens up and opens up. Okay, so you're going to wind up with something that looks like that. So once you have this open like this, then you can take your pliers and kind of bend things the way you want them. You know, you can get rid of little angles that you don't want. You want to start with sort of a clean slate of wire. You can also use your fingers. So for example, with this, if I wanted to get this bend out of this hanger, what I would do is put my fingers here, pushing against this area. Let's see, get in the right spot, pushing here. I'm holding it with this hand over here, and I push my thumb on the bend. So in other words, I go like this, I put my thumb on this bend, and I pull down with my hands so that my thumb sort of pushes the dent out. You do that here, do it all over. Sometimes you can do the other way. You can push a finger here and pull upward. But you can do this, you can easily unbend this thing, and you kind of want to start from scratch in a way. So if you have a dent, again, like you have a bump, you can grab these pieces, grab this piece, and with your thumb push up and with your hands pull down. Okay? Here we can do the same thing, just keep turning it over so it faces the way you want to bend. So I'm getting this pretty much unbent. I'm going to go kind of straight with this piece, so you can see it from the beginning. So now I'm kind of straightening it out. I've got it pretty close. Sometimes the shorter the piece, the harder it is to bend by hand. So at this very little tip at the end, you notice it's curved like that. I'm going to grab this with the pliers to straighten that part out, because sometimes those last little pieces that are very short are very hard for your fingers to bend. So right now I've got this long piece of hanger. Right? It looks like it's about 3 feet long. What you're going to wind up doing is taking both of these ends here. You're going to be taking both of these ends and inserting them into those holes in the base of your wood piece, or in their base, which is the wood piece. So let me get this so the camera can see it all. So you're going to wind up with something like this. Now, could you use this size, this big giant paddle, for your piece? Possible. We can try it. And I'm going to set this over here, and we'll see if we can get the nylon over something this big. I don't know. See, the nylon itself actually started to shrink down the size of that paddle. Now you notice here, I'm taking the nylon and I'm stretching it carefully over the corners of the block of wood. If you get caught on any kind of little edge of the wood, this thing can splinter and it can cause runs in this nylon, which people who wear them know that they run very easily as soon as you get a snag in them. So I'd be careful of this if I were you. If you get a snag in it, it's not the end of the world. So you're going to wind up with something like this, right? Now, this is a little bit boring as far as a form goes. We have forms that can be all kinds of different shapes. And I'll show you a couple. Here's a form. These pieces were all, I gotta try and find the right spot for it. These pieces were all created with the same hanger. So this has an interesting form, and you have to kind of, it's a little hard to see it on camera like this, but it has a lot of different planes that face different directions here. So it's an interesting form to look at, skinny in certain sections and wide and fat in the others. They can be tall. Here's one that was done to look like an octopus foot or an octopus tentacle, right? So this is a very long piece. So you can change the shape of the wire inside before you start painting. Here's one that's very low and circular. So this this student decided not to go so tall. And so you can see this piece has kind of a sweeping, broad, low curve to it. And they can hold there's a lot of weight on it from the wood piece. A lot of weight that can actually hold this thing stable even when it hangs over so far. So it won't, let's see if I can get this on the camera. So it doesn't tip over just because it's hanging over that far. The weight of the actual block holds it down so that this doesn't really tip. So you have a lot of flexibility and a lot of choice of how you want to create the form inside, right? Here's one someone was trying to make it look kind of like a cobra, and they did cobra painting on the outside with a little gold paint. And they thought this form looked like a cobra snake to them. So there's lots of different ways, and you'll see some of these things when you come in. But to start with, what's really important is that you take your piece and do some shifting. So I'm going to remove the nylon because we don't really need it right now. If you remove your nylon, I would not have put it on except to show you. So I'm going to be really careful to kind of try not to snag it as I remove it. Pull it out away from the edges and carefully pull it off. Don't worry if your piece comes out of the wood, that's okay. I just want to get the stocking off without putting holes in it. So now you have this wire, and you can do this in the block if you want to, or you can do it just by hand or with the pliers. Sometimes I'll just keep this in my hand like that. So I have this kind of like a big wire ping pong paddle. So you can start bending just like we did before with your thumbs, with your hands. It's pretty easy to bend this stuff. And so if you hold it together, you know the feet or these 2 points are going to be together at some point. So you can say, okay, I can hold it on top of my block and say, all right, how does this look? Does this look interesting to me? If you look to the side, you look to the bottom, you can say, well, that shape might look good. Maybe you want to do more. So it's a matter of bending and experimenting with this hanger. Now, what happens if the hanger breaks? That's a problem if you bend too quickly or you bend too much, or like too often. The problem is that the hangers themselves are not great metal, and so they can easily break if you bend them quickly or you bend them too many times. They weaken pretty rapidly. So just go slowly and experiment with how you hold your hand. You know, sometimes your hand has to hold the thing in a way that kind of grips different parts of the hanger. So as you bend, you're sort of stabilizing with one hand and bending it with the other. And I recommend going kind of crazy with some of this. Do something really unusual. You know, bend it in all different directions. Remember, these don't have to just bend one way. They can bend 3 different ways. You know, come from all different sections of this and then go into your wooden block, like so. I'll attach one, and I'll attach two. Once you start bending these things, I would say to you, be really careful that it doesn't pop out, because it can go flying if it pops out. So like these things, make sure they're down into the wooden block kind of tightly, okay? The other thing you can do is kind of in the block, you can hold it sort of there with one hand, and it's sort of hard to do, but you can hold it in the block and then kind of make some adjustments while it's in the block. So if you take a look, these things, this is a completely different shape than it started out as the paddle. I'm going to bend this around this way as well. Think about that you're going to be creating planes here, different surfaces that go in all different directions. So you want to be as kind of controlled as you can. Try to envision what it's going to look like when it's solid and it's been painted. If these things pop out of their holes or it spins around in a way that you don't want it to, just keep working with it. Keep trying to get it to bend to stay in place. If you have to, I don't know if I have any wire in there for you, sometimes putting a little piece of wire in between here like a paper clip and bend it with your pliers to sort of hold these from spinning, these sections here, that might really help if it spins too much. But otherwise, don't worry about it. All right, so to get something onto here, you have to be kind of careful. Sometimes you need an assistant. So the idea is to stretch this tightly onto your wire as quickly as you can, or as carefully as you can, without the wire popping out. It takes a little practice, and you might have some times when it doesn't cooperate. Once you get it excuse me, into the shape that you want, you can take the bottom piece and you can wrap your corners. So I hold it out with my fingers and bring it all the way down around the bottom of this. Bring it all the way down and around the bottom. Bring it all the way down and around the bottom. All the way down. This side, all the way, lift it up, all the way down and around the bottom. So your bottom's going to look kind of like this, right? So later on, we're going to cut this off, but not yet. You can leave that on there. It'll still sit flat, you can see. So since that can still sit flat, we don't need to cut it off yet. Now you can look here. This will be your last step of where you want to decide, hey, am I in the right spot? Have I got it the way I want it? You can twist a little bit when it's at this spot, but you can see this thing has a flowing curve to the surface, right? This you wouldn't see this once it's painted, but you'll see a rib area here. So it's kind of interesting. And you know how this spins? It'll stop spinning once the paint works on it. Now you notice here, this piece, I'm going to pull this down just a little further so that most of the top of my stocking is down below. So little finishing touches like that, but I'm happy with that. You don't want to leave too much up here on the toe. One of the things you can do is sort of pull this and twist that so that the seam of this nylon is along the edge and you don't see it as much once it's painted. You see how I put that edge a little closer to the wire of the hanger, and so it helps to kind of mask that. Because sometimes you can get lumpy if you don't do that. And it doesn't really bother me too much. The lumps even, still, you can cover them up. And you see how wild some of the decorations are on these things, right? So there you have it. That's how you create that piece. Now, it doesn't have to be like this. You can experiment with all these different forms, and you think about different ways to use these bent hangers. Last thing, I'll make another one. If you want to, sometimes you can bend it while it's on the hanger before you untwist it. You can use your hands to kind of bend. You can use the pliers to kind of bend. If you wanted to make some kind of a recognizable shape. Sometimes it's easier. You just have to see whether or not, once you put the nylon onto these wires, will it actually be the shape that the line looks like? Sometimes it won't. You'll have to sort of test. So you might like a shape like this, right? We know one of our feet will be down here. Okay, I'm going to take this out. Pull that out and we'll try this new one. Now, so in this case, I don't have anything to actually help me twist, so I have to use the pliers to undo this part. So I usually find it much easier to undo it earlier than at this point. So now I have my pieces, right? So I can put these right into their place on the block, and I can do my final bending to make sure it's standing in the way that I want it. Here's where you'll notice that sometimes things will happen like that, where things will bounce right out. And so you have to say, well, what do I have to do here? Think about it like a sculptor. You're solving a problem. I have to lower this. I have to lower this, to try and get these things to be a little closer to each other in height. Once I get that in, so we've got it, right? So right now I've got this wire armature or frame ready to go. And I'll try another nylon on this. Last thing I'll say is think about this with the nylon. You're trying to cover something, so you want the seam, like this little part, you want that to be like right along the edge, like so, and then it'll be disguised. You see what I'm saying? If it's along the edge of that wire. So think about that, arrange this in the beginning, but you're gonna try and fill this wire with this nylon. So you wanna start at the top, the furthest away. So I'm gonna consider that here. And I do it just like I do a sock. I start this way, and I start, bring it around, keep pulling downward. Now if your thing pops out, you'll see a lot of times that'll happen at this stage. This will pop right out of there. So you have to kind of make adjustments, try to poke it in and hold it down. Sometimes that's where you need an assistant, where you can pull this down until, well, someone holds it. Okay, but again, you want to wrap this carefully. Try not to snag it at this stage. You wrap underneath, you wrap this corner underneath, you wrap this corner underneath, and this one underneath. So again, your bottom of your piece looks like that. And this thing now, you can see where the wire is, but it's a very simple, smooth outside. This can still be bent while the nylon is on it if I want to change that form. And I want to say, I want this to go much further in a different direction. You can bend it as long as you hold the base and it doesn't start popping out. That's fine. So if I want a more horizontal piece, right, you can see. So your job now, just work on this. Try to do a good job with experimenting and trying not to have it pop out and be as stable as you possibly can. That's your first stage. Next step would be to prime the surface of this piece.